Okay, so today we are going to do 2.4, which is on the algebra of functions. So for the most part, what it's going to do is it's going to give us two functions, usually an f of x and a g of x, and then ask us to find either adding the functions together or subtracting them or multiplying them or dividing them. Okay, so looking at one like number one, you've got two functions. F of x is x squared minus 4. And g of x is x minus 3. And then after that, it's going to tell you to find something. So this time we are finding f plus g of x. So when you see it written like this, that means that's, to simplify it a little bit more, this actually means to find f of x plus g of x. So in other words, we're just adding the two functions together. So what is my f of x function? It is x squared minus 4. Now it wants me to add my g of x function, which is x minus 3. So if I'm adding two functions together, adding is just a very simplified way to say combine your like terms. Okay. In order to be a like term, what are the conditions of that? You have to have the same variable.
Same degree.
And same degree, same exponent. Exactly right. So, and you always want to start with the highest exponent and then go down from there. Okay. So my highest exponent is this 2. There's no other x squareds, so I'll just bring it down. After your x squareds come your x's. I only see one there, so I'm just going to bring that down. So essentially, all I can combine is -4 minus 3. So remember, when you're subtracting, you're going down. So I have -4, go down 3 more, or subtract 3 more, which gives me -7. So that's it on that one. Number 2. F of x this time is x squared minus 3. G of x is x minus 2. This time it wants me to find f times. So this is going to be a times. So in other words, just like the last one, I'm just going to multiply them instead of add them. So again, my f of x function, x squared minus 3. Times my g function. So I'm going to put, since it's times, you're going to put them in parentheses like this. My g function is x minus 2. So if I foil or I say foil, most of y'all look like you're fairly recent out of high school. You probably have heard that acronym FOIL, which is first, outer, inner, last, when you're multiplying two binomials together. Okay, which is essentially just distributing. Okay, so here I've got x squared times x. When you're multiplying x's, you're going to add their exponents. If you don't see an exponent, it's a 1, right? So if I don't see it, that means that's a 1 right there. So if I multiply x squared times x to the first gives me x to the third. My outer, x squared times -2, which just gives me -2x squared. And then I'll distribute the -3, which is the inner and last of FOIL. -3 times x is -3x. -3 times -2 is +6. I would look to combine like terms. terms, it's just that there's not any, right? Because remember, you have to have the same exponent in order to be put together. Yes, those are the original two functions. And then it wanted me to do the f times the g function. So that's why I did x squared minus 3 times x minus 2. Go ahead. All right, looking at number 3, f of x is x squared plus 1. G of x is x plus 3. All right, this one's a little bit different. It wants me to find g times g of x. So even though it gave me an f of x function, I don't even need it, right, for this particular problem. So what does this mean I'm going to do? I'm going to do g of x times g of x again. Since g of x is x plus 3, that just means x plus 3 times x plus 3 again. And again, I will FOIL. So my first x times x gives me x squared. My outer x times positive 3 is just positive 3x. So again, FOIL just means you're going to distribute the x to both terms in the second parentheses, and then you're going to distribute the 3 to both terms in the second parentheses. So here I've got 3 times x, which is another 3x, and then 3 times 3 is positive 9. Now this time I do have like terms. Look at these terms in the middle. They're both x's, which means like you can just put them in the same basket. Okay. Now, if I have 3 x's and then I have 3 more x's, I have 6 x's, right? I don't have 6x squared. How do you get x squared? X times x. I'm not multiplying here. I'm just putting them together. If you've got 3 of something and 3 more of that same thing, then you have 6 of those. So this is just x squared plus 6x plus 9. Number 4, f of x equals negative 13x plus 12. G of x is x squared plus 13. This time it wants me to find f of negative 3 plus g of negative 3. So on these, when you have a number in here instead of x's, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find whatever this is. Then I'll find the g of negative 3. So since they're numbers, I am going to be able to simplify each one of those solutions. Then at the end, so I'm going to have 2 answers down here. Whatever f of negative 3 and whatever g of negative 3 is. Then you just come back here and say, okay, what does it want me to do with those 2 answers? It wants me to add them together. So let's see. F of negative 3 means go to f, replace its x with negative 3. So if I do that, I have negative 13 times negative 3 plus 12. So negative times negative gives me positive 39 plus 12, which gives me 51. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to find g of -3. So I have -3 squared plus 13. -3 squared is +9 plus 13. What does that give me? 22. So now I've got 51 and 22 that it wants me to, again, you just come back up to see what does it want me to do with that? It wants me to add those two numbers together, which gives me 73. All right, number 5. F of x is -8x plus 20. G of x is x squared plus 16. And this time it wants me to find f of 4 minus g of 4. So just like the last one, I'll find f of 4, then I'll find g of 4. I'll get 2 answers, and this time I am going to subtract them at the end. So let's see, what does f of 4 mean to do? It means to go to f. Replace its x with a 4. So I have -8 times 4 plus 20. -8 times 4 gives me -32 plus 20, which gives me -12. Then I'll do the g. Find g of 4. So replace its x with the 4. So I'll have 4 squared plus 16. 4 squared is 16 plus 16, which gives me 32. So again, here's our 2 solutions. Go back to the original problem and see what it wants us to do. It wants us to subtract them this time. So -12 minus 32 gives you, not positive. -44. Because think about this. If you're at -12 on the number line, and then you subtract 32 more, you're going farther negative down the number line. Number 6, f of x is -11x plus 5. G of x is x squared plus 14. It wants me to find f of 1 times g of 1 this time. So f of 1, replacing the x here with 1. So -11 times 1 plus 5. -11 times 1 is -11 plus 5, which gives me -6. Again, you do have a calculator that you can use. And even if you don't have a TI 83 or 84, that you can do that kind of work in just to add, subtract, multiply, divide kind of calculator. So there's f of 1. Now let's find g of 1. So I replace its x with a 1, which gives me 1 squared plus 14. 1 squared is 1 plus 14 gives me 15. And what does it want me to do with those two? Wants me to multiply them. So negative 6 times 15 gives me negative 90. Right, number 7. F of x equals negative 11x plus 17. G of x squared plus 11. Wants me to find f of negative 2 over g of negative 2. So same thing again. I'm going to find the f, then I'm going to find the g, and I'm going to put the f over the f solution over the g solution. So f of negative 2. So replacing this x with negative 2. So I have negative 11 times negative 2 plus 17. Right, because this gives you, oh, what's this though? Positive 22, 39. Okay. G of negative 2. Replacing this x with negative 2. So I have negative 2 squared plus 11, which gives me 4 plus 11, which is 15. Good. So what does it want me to do? It wants me to put my f solution. So 39 over my g, which was 15. Now, that doesn't divide evenly, but, and this is one of the functions that I use the most, actually, on the calculator. If you do not like, especially if your fractions are huge, if the numbers in your fraction are huge, you can always reduce them in the calculator. Just type in what your answer is, 39 divided by 15. So if it gives you a decimal like this, 2.6, that just means it doesn't divide evenly, but it doesn't mean it doesn't reduce. To reduce fractions, just hit your math button. The very first thing under math says, turn my answer into a simplified fraction. So hit enter. Turn your last answer into a simplified fraction. So hit enter again, which reduces it for you to 13 over 5. So again, that one did reduce. Okay, so again, to reduce fractions, you always just hit the math button on your calculator and then hit enter, enter. That will reduce your fractions for you. That's exactly right. The reason it reduced is because 3 goes into both of those numbers. It goes into 39 13 times, and it goes into 15 5 times. That's exactly right. Number 8, negative 2x plus 4 is your f function. Your g function is x squared plus 5. And it wants me to find f plus g of x. So this is just like number 1. So essentially it wants me to find f of x plus g of x. F of x is negative 2x plus 4. That wants me to find, add that to g of x, which is x squared plus 5. And again, adding functions is a simple way to say combine like terms. Starting with your highest exponent, which would be the x squared. Who's going together here? Just the 4 and 5. Right. So I have x squared then the x, so minus 2x. There's my like terms, 4 and 5. I'll just put that together to get 9.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
I understand why the x squared comes first, but I think I'm confused on, so the negative 2x is still in the first degree, right?
Yeah.
But aren't the 5 and the 4 also in the first degree?
No, they don't have a degree. Their degree is 0.
Okay.
Yeah. The degree is the exponent. The degree of the whole function is whatever its highest exponent is. And the degree is what gives the function its shape on the graph. Okay, so since this one's highest exponent is a 2, it's going to be a parabola on the graph. The degree is what gives it its shape. Yeah. However, if you haven't seen it on your homework, it will not be on a quiz or a test. All your quizzes and tests I pulled straight from your homework problems. Yeah. What number are we on? 9. So let's see. F of x is 5x minus 9. G of x is 2x minus 5. And I'm doing f minus g of x. And you actually have to be careful, more careful when you're subtracting. So I'm doing f of x minus g of x. What is f of x? 5x minus 9, good. Now, when I'm subtracting, let me show you, because that's what I want to do. I want to subtract the g function. If I just put minus and then 2x minus 5, the only thing that I'm subtracting there is the 2x. Because what do I want to subtract? I want to subtract the whole entire g function, which means I want to subtract all of that. Not just the first part of it, the whole thing. Because now that I have a minus in front of that parentheses, it needs to be distributed. That's your subtracting part. Once you do that, distributing that negative, that is the subtracting. And then you're just combining like terms. So I'm just bringing down the 5x minus 9. So that's a minus 2x, but here's where people would make a mistake, because if I distribute this negative to this negative, what does it actually turn that to? Good. So when you subtract an entire function, you want to make sure you do subtract the entire function and not just part of it. And you do that by putting the parentheses around it and distributing the negative. Once you do that, then you're done subtracting. Now you're combining like your like terms. So who goes with the 5x? 3 x's. And then minus 4, right? Right. Number 10. F of x equals negative 5x plus 2. G of x equals x squared minus 5. This time I'm finding g minus f. Of x. Okay. Okay. So here, what am I doing? I need my g function, which is x squared minus 5. Minus, since I'm subtracting, I'm going to put the minus and then a parentheses, the f function, which is negative 5x plus 2. Then I'll distribute this negative, which changes signs, right? So I'll just bring down the x squared minus 5. What does this turn this into?
Plus 5.
Good. Positive 5x and minus 2, combine your like terms. Again, the only ones going together are those two. So I've got x squared, then plus 5x minus 7. Number 11, f of x is x squared minus 12 g of x is 12 minus x. And it wants me to find f minus g of this time negative 10. So just like we were doing last time, since this is a number, it's the same thing as saying f of negative 10 minus g of negative 10. So I'm going to find both of these and then subtract the answers at the end. So f of negative 10 gives me negative 10 squared minus 12. Negative 10 squared is positive 100 minus 12 gives me 88. Then I'll find the g of negative 10. So let's see, be careful with your signs here. G of negative 10 means 12 minus from the function and then negative 10. So what does this really mean you are doing to those two numbers? Adding them, right? Because subtracting a negative is the same thing as addition. So this is 12 plus 10, which gives me 22. Now go back to the original. What does it want me to do? Subtract them. So 88 minus 22 gives me 66. Number 12. F of x is x squared minus 15. G of x is 6 minus x. This time it wants me to find f times g of c. So again, just like the last one, I'm going to go to my f function, replace its x with a c, right? Because you replace with what's ever in here. Then I'm going to find the same. I'm going to do the g function and replace its x with a c. I'll get two solutions and I will multiply them. It's just going to look different since that's a c and not a number. So if I go to my f function and replace its x with a c, what is that going to do? It's just going to turn this into a c. So you will have c squared minus 15. Now, when this is a number, I can combine those, right? I just can't combine. That's as far as I can take this. I can't put those together. So that part's done. Now I'll do the same thing with the g function. I'll replace its x and turn it into a c. So I have 6 minus c. So once again, I can't put those together. What is it? And then I go back and say, okay, what does it want me to do with my two solutions? Multiply them together. So this solution, which is c squared minus 15, times the other solution, which is 6 minus c. And just like earlier, when I had two binomials like that, I distributed or FOILed. So I'll distribute that c squared. C squared times 6 just gives me 6c squared. C squared times negative c. Careful with your signs. A positive times a negative is going to give me a negative. Remember, you're adding the exponents. So I have c squared times c, which gives me c to the third. I enter negative 15 times 6, which is negative 90. And my last, negative times a negative. So that turns it positive 15c. Now, there's not any like terms to combine. But it does say type the polynomial in descending order, which just means like we always do, we put our highest exponent first, take its sign with it. So up front, I'll have negative c to the third. Then my squared, so positive 6c squared. Then my c, so positive 15c. And then my constant, minus 90. Number 13, f of x equals x squared minus 3. G of x is 1 minus x. And it wants me to find f over g of negative 3. So again, what am I doing? I'm going to find f. This time I'm replacing with a number again. F of negative 3, g of negative 3. And then in the end, I'll put the f solution over the g solution. So let's see, what's f of negative 3 means? Negative 3 squared minus 3. So negative 3 squared is 9. Minus 3 gives me 6. Careful with your G, watch your signs. 1 minus, replace the X with negative 3. So once again, I have minus a negative. So that really means 1 plus 3, which gives me 4. What do? I put the 6 over the 4. You can type that in your calculator. 6 divided by 4. Then hit math, enter, enter, right? That's how you reduce fractions. Math, enter, enter. And what does it reduce it to? 3 over 2. All right, now on 14 and 15, it's going to give me 2 functions. And it's going to ask me the same thing. It's going to say, what is the domain of the sum of the functions, the difference of the functions, and the product of the functions? The sum means you will be doing what to the 2 functions? How do you find the sum? Add them. The difference means subtract. The product means multiply. Then it's going to say, those answers are not even going to be entered in. It's going to just want to know what is the domain of each of those. So remember on Monday when we talked a lot about domain and how to find it? Okay, what was the restriction that we used the most? What's a restriction in the domain? If you have a fraction with an x in your denominator, right? Because what do you not want the denominator of your fraction to equal? 0, right? So if we had a fraction with an x in the bottom, we just set the denominator, said can't equal 0, and solved it for x. So let's look at the 2 functions on, that's what we're going to be looking for here. Let's look at the 2 functions on number 14. F of x equals x squared. Would there be any restrictions just on that domain? No, it'd be all real numbers, right? What about g of x equals 10x minus 10? Would there be any restrictions on the domain of that function? No, because there's not a denominator with an x in it. If there's not any restrictions in this one, and there's not any restrictions in this one, then if I'm finding the domain of the sum, the difference, and the product, there's not going to be any restrictions on the domain of any of these. Because think about it, how do I get a restriction? I'd have to have a fraction. If you add these two functions together, are you going to end up with a denominator anywhere? No. If you don't start with a denominator, you're not going to get one by adding, subtracting, or multiplying. So you actually don't have to do all of those, right? That would actually be the most difficult part of the problem. So what you're looking for is, does either function have a restriction? If they don't, which like this one, they don't, that would be the restriction on all of these also. So this one is, they're all the same thing. That's another thing. All of these are going to have the same domain. Whatever the sum is, the domain of it is going to be the domain of all of these. So X is a real number. And that's all of those. Number 15. F of X is 1 over X minus 3. G of X is 7X to the third. So again, you just look at each of the functions and find the restrictions on those. This one does have a restriction, right? Because it's got a denominator with an X. So X minus 3 can't equal 0. Solve it for X. So add the 3 to both sides. So X can't equal 3. And does this one have a restriction? No. So if I added those two fractions or these two functions together, guess what the denominator of that sum or that solution would be? X minus 3. If I subtracted them, it would be X minus 3. If I multiplied these two functions together, the denominator of it, the solution would be X minus 3, right? I'm not actually going to do it because that would literally be the hardest part of the problem. Let's just think about adding them together. So I have 1 over X minus 3 plus 7X to the third. If I was actually going to add those two things together, I would have to get a common denominator, right? Because that's what you have to do when you add fractions. You have to have a common denominator. This is the only denominator, which means it is the common denominator, which means over here, this is why we're not doing it. You'd have to multiply this times that. That would give you the same denominator. Then you would have to combine like terms up top. That's a whole lot of work. But what's that going to end up? I don't know what's going to be on top, but guess what's going to be in the bottom? X minus 3. So that's why, and the same thing with subtracting and same thing with multiplying. Okay, so again, you're essentially just looking at either one of these for the restriction, finding it for all three of these answers. X is real and X can't equal 3. That's the domain for all of those. When you're typing this in, it's going to give you this part. You either choose A or B. You choose the one that says X is real, and it's going to give you a blank right here. You actually have to type in this whole thing, not just 3. Okay? When you type it in, you just use the X from the keyboard. This can't equal symbol will be down there in the toolbox, right? Where you type in X squared and fractions and all that. So it'll be down there for you. All right, last one. Number 16, F of X is 3X minus 2. G of X is 2X minus 14. And it wants me to do all the same, oh no, it doesn't actually. It wants me to just find the domain of F over G. So I'll put my F function, 3x minus 2, over my G function, which is 2x minus 14. And here's what I'm finding the domain of. Again, I do have a restriction because I've got an x in my denominator. So that denominator can't equal 0. And then solve it for x. So add 14 to both sides. So 2x can't equal 14 and divide by 2. So x can't equal 7. Okay. All right. On